views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast are the content creator's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Essex County College. The material and information presented here is for entertainment and informative purposes only. It should not be considered as professional advice or a substitute for seeking professional guidance.
What's good, y'all? This is me, Jon Inahuazo, and welcome back with another episode of The Loner, where if I have a purpose to live, then I don't have to make my own life look harsh. I don't really need a harsh life, of course, to satisfy my own needs. That said, I want to talk about television, because I promised you that last week. So this week, we're going to be talking about that, and then I wanted to give you guys a bonus topic afterwards. And so, let's just talk about Arts High School once again, because, it's just time for me to go ahead and remember, and maybe just expand some more things about myself. So, segment number one, homemade TV. And let's just get started back when I said, Arts High School used to be my dream school, but, like I said, North Board of Education betrayed me. That, of course, you know that already. But as I mentioned before, they actually had a television broadcast production department where students could broadcast and produce newscasts, their public service announcements, and commercials for their school. And even then, of course, they also provided, short films, but even then, of course, they're not always seen by the public. And even if I go ahead and make my own film here at college, you probably won't be seeing that, of course, in public. I don't even know the reason why, but I digress. Nowadays, of course, they're known as the Cinematography and Media Department, and their television studio has been removed to focus on video production. So it's like if you want to focus on social media, like content creation, I feel like there's just not really a need for television anymore, but I'll talk more about that later on in this episode. So for now, I just want to discuss to you how you can make your own television studio in your bedroom. If you really want to recreate the identity, of course, with it. If you really want to create the authentic part of television, of course, like as a newscaster or your talk show, of course, your game show, then it's really just complicated, of course, but I can just go ahead and simplify what you do need, of course, before I get started to the main topic. So let's start off with the camera. As of now, of course, I currently own a Sony ZV-10, so, if everybody tells you to recommend this camera, then you might as well just go ahead, of course, and just grab the ZV-10, of course, and just start recording. Unless if you already have your phone, of course. Like, if your phone's already decent enough, but you can do a lot better, of course, with a ZV-10, or even a camera, of course, from Sony. And, of course, while Sony appealed this camera to content creators and vloggers, you can actually use that, of course, to improve your image quality, your video, and photography scenarios. Just think about it. If you go ahead, of course, and buy a camera like a mirrorless camera right now or a DSLR, then, you actually have the lens you can always focus on the lens the most than just the camera body. Where, of course, the kit lens, of course, for 60 millimeters is 50 millimeters. Those kit lenses, of course, let anyone start their goals before they can afford to upgrade the lens more than the camera. So it's like if you ever buy a Sigma, of course, then, you're already making a good decision. But ironically, of course, I wanted to talk about budgeting as well, but again, I'll talk more about that, of course, later on. Because I've actually learned something out of this. The more you spend on the lens, they save money on future-proofing your camera rig rather than buying a $2,000 camera with only the kit lens. So it's think about it. If you go ahead, of course, and just buy a camera worth $2,000, then it's what's really the point? You actually have something professional. But if you can only afford the kit lens, of course, it's what's really the point, of course, even buying it anyway? If you realize, of course, you oversighted at something. So in that case, you oversighted at the lens, you oversighted at the lighting. Hence the reason why, of course, in this show, there's only the show called Senior Lane, of course, only has a camera. And whether or not, of course, I'll reveal this to right now, it's on an iPhone. So it's actually fine enough, of course. It's okay, of course, if you go ahead and use your new iPhone. But as I said last week, I just wouldn't recommend the iPhone 16s, the 16E, whatever it's called. But still, I digress. So, now that we already have the camera in, of course, let's talk about the switcher. That, of course, everybody would tell you to go ahead and recommend the Blackmagic Design 810 Mini Pro. And really, of course, I guess I would go ahead and just join the bandwagon and say I would probably recommend that switcher too. Basically, it just depends on your budget and your priorities, but it's not about personal preferences. That's what AI usually exploits on. Whenever you go on, of course, and just say, which item can I recommend, which item are you going to recommend, then it's usually whether they say it depends on your personal preferences and your specific needs. But I'll do this. If you already have your specific needs and personal preferences, there's just no reason why you should be saying any of that. But again, I'll talk more about that next week when I talk about AI, because honestly, of course, I actually hate AI. So you can consider buying an A10 Mini Pro. It's a simplified video switcher, which you can learn the essentials of how television production works. And even so, of course, you can actually use it, of course, as in single camera shows. And so if you're like a live streamer, think about this, of course. If you prioritize live streaming, you're like a content creator, and you actually enjoy the live stream. You actually enjoy live streaming video games and all that. Sure, of course, you can go ahead, of course, and just buy a Steam Deck, not a Steam Deck, but actually, I'm going to look it up, of course, whether I'm saying the right product. But I think it's called the Stream Deck. Yeah, yeah, apparently it is a Stream Deck from Elgato, or some people would go ahead and refer to it as Elgato. Never mind, of course, I'll just go ahead and just stick it off with just the Elgato Stream Deck. So you can just go ahead and buy that, of course. But even the A10 Mini Pro also has its benefits, of course, to make your shows look more professional, and even your live streams, of course, if you wanted it to. But if you can't, that's just, based on your needs and your specific, it's based on your specific priorities and your budget. So if you can afford, of course, a switcher, then you can say it's either an optional or an essential to you. It's all really on you. Now, I've actually heard of OBS before. You can go ahead and use it as a free software, but it's like, to me, you can really do a lot better, of course. And if you ever want to focus on software, you can actually save your money, of course, on vMix. And I've actually learned that because of Reddit. So, yeah, of course, if you ever want to do television production, then there are some businesses, well, not businesses, but there are some colleges, of course, some schools that prioritize a vMix. And if it's not vMix, then it's usually a TriCaster. That, of course, that's the most generic thing you can ever buy, of course, at school. And sure, of course, while it may be a professional enough, like $10,000 switcher, they just use to be honest, of course, they just use the more basic templates, of course. And even though the templates, of course, are really fine, you can really do a lot better, of course, if you hired a graphic designer. So if your school has a graphic designer, if one of your students actually have a graphic designer, then let them contribute, of course, to their shows too. And that way you can actually be professional, and you can actually learn how to make your own TV shows with a graphic designer, a director, a producer, a camera operator, a technical director. It's not that I used to be a technical director, but I was a technical director for one show, or for one session for my television production class. That, of course, actually went fine, but that was because I was using a software from Blackmagic Design, and they had cameras, of course, also from Blackmagic. So if you ever want to prioritize that, then be my guest, of course. You can go ahead and just, go get the switcher, of course, if you wanted to. Or if not, go ahead and consider the vMix, which I would probably recommend either of the two models. Or, either of those two, I would probably recommend either the vMix HD license for $350. Maybe you'll go ahead, of course, and afford that more than the 4K license. 4K license, of course, may be overkill, but again, it just depends on your specific needs. But of course, if you're a beginner, of course, and you don't really know how you want to execute your live stream priorities and how you want to do television production, of course, in your bedroom, then I would probably recommend the HD license. And while, of course, you may have to look around, of course, the limitations. At least, of course, just embrace limitations, of course, because you can really do a lot if you're creative. And so if you're creative, then obviously the HD license should be fine. Or if you want the 4K license, then also go ahead and buy that, of course, for $700. Even though, of course, if I were me, of course, the owner, of course, of vMix, I probably would have sold that. I probably would have sold that for $500 maybe, and then the HD license probably for $200. But that's just my opinion, of course. But it's not really about pricing. But hey, of course, I'm actually discussing about pricing, and that's going to be one of the topics I'll talk about later on. Anyways, let's move on, of course, to the next item that you'll need, a microphone. Now, that, of course, it'll just depend on what you really need. So that, of course, I'm not going to really give you a recommended item. Now, the next item we're going to be looking at is a microphone. And now, that I actually won't really recommend anything, but here's what I will say. Don't get a USB microphone, but prioritize an XLR one, because that's going to sound more professional than a USB one. But if you actually have a USB to XLR, a combo, if a microphone prioritizes both USB and XLR, then feel free to go ahead and buy that. Of course, from either from Shure or Rode, and of course, I'm not really sponsored by any of these businesses or companies that I'm recommending. So for the microphones, it's really up to you. But just don't go ahead and cheap out on the Apple EarPods. you can really do a lot better, of course, than just shouting out with a really $20 mic at best. And then the next thing, of course, we're going to be talking about is an audio interface. Now, for this part, of course, it's really all on you, whether you do really want an audio interface or not. But here's what I will say. If you go on ChatGPT, oftentimes they'll recommend the Focusrite Scarlett. And while that's while I will say it's a fine audio interface, it can really do a lot better. And that's why, of course, it's better off, of course, if you support businesses with product advisors, of course, that can actually recommend you the items that you want to buy. So it's like if you tell them their specific needs, then it's better off you talk to business. Then it's better off that you go ahead and just talk to a gear advisor or your sales engineer, as we what it calls it. So if you ever prioritize any of that, then you'll probably get the right products instead of like looking up and researching all the things and telling any AI, of course, on which item you're gonna buy or something. So that's just the reason why, of course, just prioritize humans, because at least they know what they're doing. AI, they just have no idea what they're doing. And I'll explain more about that in the next episode. But anyways, I think this segment's already going on for too long. But again, this is what it is. What it is. I'm just trying to make the show like half an hour. Anyway, so you can also, like I said, if you wanted an audio interface, you can really do a lot better with a mixer. Sometimes, of course, when you go to like television studios, they're always going to have a mixer. So like as a recording console, then you can always future-proof your studio by having a Yamaha MG10XU. So if you want to buy that, go ahead. And if not, there's always an actual interface like the solid-state Logic SSL2 Plus Mark II. And as you can see, I'm recording this on a Rodecaster Pro. If you ever want to simulate this voice and you want to simulate how I would personally recommend. Personally, of course, if you want to do podcasting and you actually love using the Rodecaster Pro here at college, then you can always use the Rodecaster Duo because I'm alone. So at the best, of course, I can tell you for like $400 or so, it's not overkill, or probably like for $500 if you actually buy it new. And if not, of course, then the most recommended item, of course, I would suggest is the Tascam Model 12. Like it's a whole workhorse. You can really do a lot, of course, with that. So it's like if you go on a film club and you want to learn how to make films, then the Tascam Model 12 actually has a recorder. So you can always do all of that, of course, and you don't really need to buy anything else because you actually have everything. You have an audio interface, you have a recorder, you have a mixer, and even you could use it as a DAW. So it's like if you ever use FL Studio or even Logic Pro, of course, and even Ableton Live, then obviously you can really do a lot of work with a Tascam product. So I would highly recommend you that if you have the money for it. Now the last thing, of course, you'll need, of course, is lighting. Now that, of course, is really up to you whether you're able to afford any lighting. So whether you want like room lighting, lamps, softboxes, monolights, just prioritize any sort of lighting aside from LED lights. While, of course, LED lights may be powerful, again, as I said already, you can just do a lot better. Anyway, the budget, of course, is getting higher, of course, and higher as time goes on because of consumerism and inflation. You can always prioritize budgeting. You can always prioritize budget and quality. And that, of course, is what I want to talk about, of course, today. But again, we have to talk about television, as I said. So if you want, of course, those are just the 5 things that you need, of course, to start a television studio. Now that's out of the way, let me talk about television next. So this next segment is called The Irrelevance of Cable Television, and this is a criticism to Paramount. Now, I actually used to care about television, but now I just don't. So in that case, my question to you is, if I'm attending television production courses, why am I taking it if television is dying and social media is taking over public access? If we just gotta figure this whole thing out, and I think this episode is probably gonna go on for so long, it's probably gonna be like 40 minutes or so, but it really is what it is. So let's see what's on TV. Usually you would go ahead and just watch some crime, drama, soap operas, reality shows. Reality shows, of course, are the most common thing that you'll ever see aside from talk shows. And if not, then you always have comedy, variety shows, sitcoms, western, court shows. That's another often thing that you usually see. And then it's at court shows, and you always see some game shows, some newscasts, some children's programming, which, is really irrelevant nowadays, some sports, and even infomercials and award shows. And I think there's a specific topic that I want to talk about and it's about the award shows and how I would say the winners are really just a bunch of nobodies. Like the Oscars, of course, I actually heard of the Oscars. Unfortunately, I've never heard of any of the movies. Out of any of the movies, I've never heard any of them aside from Dune Part 2. So that's the only thing I will just go ahead and say. I've never heard of any movie or any actor or actresses or anybody, of course, who worked on the Oscars, but I congratulate them. But as I said before, the only movie I know about out of this year or 2024 would just be Dune Part 2. Now, let's go ahead and just talk about this then. Back then, you used to watch television and see what would be convenient for you. For example, back in the 1980s, children used to watch like afternoon programming consisting of cartoons, which nowadays just don't even exist anymore. And replaced with some more court shows, some syndicated talk shows, and news. And even then, of course, this is 2020. This is 2025. Back in the 1930s, most citizens lacked any conviction that television would replace the radio before World War II, because the radio had more entertainment than television until the 1950s. And so it's like, that's a whole difference. Because back then, of course, you actually had the radio for music, for variety shows, sitcoms, dramas. Like, you really had everything, of course, back when the golden age of radio existed. And while, of course, this is probably going to be like an educational type of show, at least it's better, of course, than what you're currently watching on Saturday mornings. That is the least thing I can say to you right now. But I'm not going to show pride, of course, and because I digress. There's just so many digressions, of course, I can really make in this episode. So if you want, you can go ahead and count how many times I digress. Now then, because of all this, of course, I'm starting to learn about nostalgia. And here's the thing. All the nostalgia, of course, that you're currently watching all comes from the 1950s, the 1960s, the 70s, 80s, 90s, the 2000s, and all of that, of course, that you're currently seeing right now are called reruns. And basically, nostalgia is a sentimental longing or wistful affection from the past. Well, a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, typically for a period replaced with happy personal associations. And I feel like if you're like old enough, then you will understand what nostalgia means to you. The 2010s doesn't really qualify itself as a nostalgia, but you can just look back as a retrospective. That's what I would refer as the 2010s or the 2K. They're all just retrospectives, but not as like vintage or nostalgia. Unless if you're from the 1990s, then maybe I'll consider that. You can always remember the past too, but the past isn't always everything. Because here's the question to you. What happens when corporations try to exploit nostalgia and existing properties? Let me talk about SpongeBob and the Loud House, because those are just the examples, of course, I want to clarify. SpongeBob, of course, is one of my favorite shows that I used to watch back when I was a kid. Nowadays, I just don't really watch any of these shows from that Nickelodeon offers, like SpongeBob or the Loud House. The Loud House is, of course, another show that I used to watch. But as I said, because of seasonal rot and because of sexual harassment allegations, the creator got fired, and then quality dropped after season 3. And I actually got bored when season 4 came in. Season 5 was mediocre. That I forgot all about it. Season 6, I just stopped caring. And not that there's season 8, I just left because there's like no reason for me to go on and continue writing about one show, one Nicktoon that's just doing something repetitive. It's like, in a nutshell, of course, it's like you obviously have something, of course. There's a scenario, of course, that happens. And so you actually there's a plot, of course, that you have to execute. So you have a problem, and then something's, of course, when there's a problem, I just really hate when sometimes they fill up the time with excuses. It's like they go ahead and make disguises, of course. If not, they go out and just lie for like 10 or so minutes, and then just as when they get themselves caught, they would have to apologize for them. And they would be easily forgiven. It's like, I know it's a cartoon, a Nicktoon, but it's like almost every episode is like this anyway. It's boring, of course, that I'm right now seeing. So if I'm seeing a boring show, then it's like, why would I want to consider watching more? And the more repetitive it is, like the more predictable it is, I'm just starting to lose interest. That's the reason why, of course, I stopped watching that show. And SpongeBob, that's the same reason why. Because it doesn't belong to the same audience. It just doesn't have the same demographic at all. So with SpongeBob, of course, with the exploitation of SpongeBob, you have Camp Coral and the Patrick Stewart Show. I actually prefer the louder than Camp Coral. Camp Coral, I just never cared about that show at all. I have no idea why I even watched that anyway. Aside from that, Minimalist Post is like underrated. Now, while I wouldn't say I would personally recommend that, it's just my personal opinion. But it was an underrated show. It had 2 seasons. At least I actually loved that. Of course, that wasn't like the same 2 shows, like the same 2 cash cows, as I mentioned, like Lincoln Loud and SpongeBob. But that's actually one of my favorite shows, of course. Before that show got canceled, so I mean, sadly, of course, that happened, of course, and now there's rock paper scissors, and now currently they're on break, and then there's like door reboots. It's like you can actually have a lot of negative. There's like a bunch of negative feedback, of course, for like a bunch of negative feedback towards reboots and existing IPs, and so it's like if you go on and just exploit all the nostalgia, of course, that they used to bring in, and then you decide to bring that backwards for a newer audience, then it's like you just don't recognize the original property anymore because it's not even meant for you. So there's just no reason why I would want to continue watching the same show over and over again. And so, as I said, this segment, of course, is just me criticizing the Paramount because at least for Cartoon Network, they can do a lot better. They have more potential, even if they don't have any new shows aside from Adult Swim. Adult Swim may be classic, but even Toonami, of course, is also suffering, such as their new segment, of course, since 2 years ago at least, Checker Past. Now then, let's go ahead and look at the schedule, of course, that's on Paramount. Comedy Central, let's look at that first. Usually you would go on and see Futurama, which is a show from Fox, and it's created by and it's created from, and that's coming from The Simpsons, the creator, of course. And then there's South Park, that's an original show. Seinfeld, that's an NBC show. The Office, that's another NBC show. Family Guy, that's a Fox show. The Cleveland Show, sometimes they air that, but that's a Fox show. The Daily Show, that's the original talk show. Parks and Recreation, another NBC show. So most of the shows, of course, that they're airing on Comedy Central are either syndicated or edited. Like, you barely get to see anything original from them. So mostly it's either just like Fox or NBC. And here's the thing, it's like, is it just me or am I getting tired, of course, of their channels airing the same movies over and over again? Airing the same show, the same set of shows, the same set of episodes. It just gets repetitive, of course. And you really thought that reruns, of course, could be timeless. But it's like, what if you go on and repeat all of that over and over again for like 365 days? Like, don't you find it repetitive, of course, that you see that? And it's like, that's another thing. Is it just me, of course, or am I missing South Park Wednesdays? Whatever happened to that? Nowadays, of course, all you're going to be seeing is like Family Guy, and that's a whole marathon out of that. And now, like 3 hours of Seinfeld, 3 hours of South Park, and then more Seinfeld, and then we got Family Guy, and then one episode of The Daily Show, and then we're back with more Family Guy, and then South Park, and then some infomercials. It's like, and I'll admit, South Park is one of my favorite shows. Of course, that's not Nickelodeon related. Infinity Train, another show that I actually that I love watching. Unfortunately, HBO Max ruined that, or Netflix, if you're in America, that's called Max. Now that's no longer relevant. And then there's another show that I used to love, and I still like this. To this day, I still like this, of course, even though I barely watch it, but it's a regular show. So you actually have that, of course. And at least now, of course, you're currently listening to my interests and what I used to love, what I used to like, what I've actually used to watch back then. Anyways, Nickelodeon, let's look at that channel because that's the main channel that I used to watch back then. So, most of it, of course, is mostly just a bunch of SpongeBob. Like, that's all there is nowadays. If it's not The Loud House or, any other Nicktoon, of course, or any other live action show from Nickelodeon, it's always SpongeBob, 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 SpongeBob. That's all there is nowadays. And if it's not SpongeBob, then there's Paw Patrol. That's the only thing they air on Nick Jr. And it just disappoints me, of course, because, like, what else is there? It's like it's a graveyard network that has no priorities, has no goals at all. It's like it really brings cable networks to shame. Because CBS, NBC, ABC, even though they don't have any variety or the same things that they air, at least they have something to air. I just don't really watch it because I just don't really care about what they provide nowadays. That's the reason why, of course, I go on and stick with YouTube because I've been used to YouTube, and So I've just said. So I'm just saying, like, why am I just paying $100 set? Why am I just paying $100 just for an antenna setup when I'm not even watching television at all? Like that's the same thing that I'm asking myself back when my father used to pay for Fios or in that case Verizon. $200 of course for cable TV though, with internet. Just think about it. Why am I spending $200 on reruns? It's like if I ever want to do that, of course, then I could just always rely on streaming services, or if not, I could just buy a season pass, and not from a video game, but from a streaming platform. Download, of course, a copy from an episode, or in that case, download a whole season and watch that, of course, from time to time. That way, of course, I won't feel bored. It's like I can always watch it whatever I want, and however I want, how I want to watch the show, and whatever I want it. And if you want to watch the original airings, then I guess it's another special thing. That's another special way, of course, of watching your own show, your own favorite shows too. If you ever wanted to do that, of course, but it's fine, I guess. Anyways, and so it's mostly just SpongeBob and Paw Patrol. And now talk about something else. Because most of the time, it's mostly this. The movies, of course, are all the most repetitive things that I don't really care about anymore. So, you have Despicable Me, Sonic the Hedgehog, and Hotel Transylvania. Can you actually re-edit? I'm actually going to do another take on this, so just edit that part. Now we're going to be looking at movies now. Now, it's just the same few things. The same 6 or 7 movies or so. It's mostly like, if you're lucky enough, you have Despicable Me 1, Despicable Me 2, Despicable Me 3, and if not, then there's Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and then you have the whole Transylvania franchise. And if it's not that, then you have Shrek, which apparently I've just learned that they're going to do a 5th sequel to all this, Shrek 5. Anyways, that's all there currently are right now. It's like, just like how I said previously, it's like, is it just me that I'm finding this whole schedule repetitive? And it's worse, of course, for Nicktoons as well, because all they're airing now is just 24/7 SpongeBob. It's like, no wonder why, of course, I would call them commercial free. Because if all you're airing is SpongeBob, then it's like, why would anybody spend all that time, of course, watching that when it's just like randomizing episodes and such and such? Teen Nick isn't really any better nowadays, because it used to be the Dan Schneider channel and with some superhero stuff, and nowadays I call them as the underwhelming recreation of Nicktoons and Dan Schneider. On Paramount Network, you currently see is Bar Rescue, Two and a Half Men, and the same few movies, of course. Any other channel, of course, is currently out of Paramount Global. And then there's MTV Ridiculousness. And would you look at that, of course, we're about to reach 30 minutes. And so let's hope that this will be the first show that's going to be an hour long. And if not, at best it would be like 45 minutes. Anyways, and so at the end of the day, here's what I'm going to say. Out of the cable networks that I've mentioned so far, Paramount Global is creatively bankrupt. And the reason why I say this is because they're running on the same few shows, the same few movies. So it's like without variety, then of course there's going to be lower viewership. And with lower viewership, that means, of course, there's barely anybody is going to care about what you watch, and barely anybody's going to care about your channel. I'm not trying to say that shut off the channel, of course, or just do all of that, because that would be harsh. But it's unfortunately the truth. Now, it's just me, of course, or here's what I've actually known and learned about TV. This show called The Office is what I currently see nowadays. It's most oftenly see on television. It's like no matter what channel you watch, you're always going to be seeing an episode of The Office. If you like that show, if you love that show, then that's fine to me. But it's like, there's already enough channels that's airing the same thing. And so is the Big Bang Theory and Seinfeld and Friends and all those shows that any other network originally recorded or broadcasted out of like NBC, CBS, ABC, especially with American 20's home videos, and even the defunct channels like the WB, the WB and the United Paramount Network, or Nike's UPN. I've actually just started to learn that, of course, when I started recording this episode a few days ago. So at the end of the day, you just call them a zombie networks where they're mostly just airing reruns, of course, of your same shows, of your favorite shows. So whenever you feel tired, of course, of watching a rerun, they just know, of course, are creatively bankrupt. And currently, of course, the rerun is a repeater of it's basically a repetition, of course, of a show or an episode again. So if you've seen the original broadcast, then go ahead and listen and watch that. And you're going to notice some differences. The first time you watch the original airing, it's going to be normal. But the second time they air it again, well, this time they're going to speed that whole episode up for some reason. So that's just what I don't even like. That's what I don't like either. Like whenever, of course, cable television, of course, decides to speed up some shows, then it just ruins the whole pace. And of course, and I guess it's just me, of course, who doesn't feel comfortable listening or watching a sped up version, of course, of a certain episode of a certain show. So if I wanted to watch the original unedited content, then it's obvious that I would have to go on a streaming service just so I can go on and watch that, of course, again. That's why, of course, I prefer watching streaming services. If I had the money, I would prefer to go ahead and watch streaming services. And if not, I would prefer to go on and just look at Apple TV, maybe. Anyways, let's talk about character speeds, because that's another thing, of course, I want to talk about as well. And this is something recent, of course. Like, if you remember how I talked about, if you remember the Digital Outcast, I've actually discussed about Paramount. But because I've actually lacked any research, now I decided to go on, of course, and revisit that for a bit. And I want to discuss more about that because today we got to learn about the victim card. And this was going to be an upcoming episode too. I was going to originally talk about that. So I guess let's go ahead and talk about that now. So, carriage disputes is a disagreement between the broadcaster and the distributor over the right to retransmit the broadcast signal. So, in other words, you're seeing them as greed against consumers. Because apparently, of course, things occur between cable companies, streaming services, and broadcasters. And the main goal is this. Because corporations are raising the cost, of course, for consumers, they expect you, of course, to pay more money to watch their own content. So if you don't agree, of course, so it's like if you don't really agree with their contract, of course, or with how much money, of course, and how much income, of course, they want a cable provider or somebody, of course, to distribute your own transmitter. Well, not your transmitter, but your own transmission. Then it's like that's how carriage disputes happens, because apparently it's like you want a 200%, want a 200% increase. It's going to disappoint. It's like it's gonna disappoint them, of course, because it's like if you're already paying like for $200, and it's like why would you want to go ahead and pay $300 now, just so you can just so you can go on and watch the same shows over and over again. To me, of course, it seems like it's irrelevant, of course, and it's just not as important as it used to be. So it feels like if you have YouTube TV, then you're not safe. If you have Fios, Comcast, or Xfinity, then you're not safe either. Hence, of course, if you go on and watch local channels, of course, on whatever you live, like in New Jersey or New York, Los Angeles, California. I would call them as New York, New Jersey, California, Texas, wherever you live and however you're listening to this, even though this is just a local show here in Newark. It's superior, of course, that you go on and just buy an antenna setup, of course, because apparently if you go on and develop satellite, of course, you just go on and develop if you go on, of course, and just develop and create, of course, basically build your own setup, of course, based on antenna TV, then it's going to be superior than how streaming services, live TV services, and even, illegal ones, the pirate streaming services, of course. You can just notice the whole lag, of course, and the timing behind it. Like, think of New Year's Eve, of course. Think of the New Year's. If it's over like 12 in the morning right now, then it's like if you go on and look at YouTube right now, then you'll be stuck in like 30. You'll just be stuck around 30 seconds. So you'll be delayed for like 30 seconds, even though it's already like 12 a.m. So that means, of course, you can go on and look at the antenna, maybe set up an antenna, of course, and you'll see how, of course, they're lighting, of course, how the time, of course, is always aligning with the original broadcast. Anyways. So you always have that, of course. And for cable networks, of course, are just being replaced with streaming platforms. So I guess you can say I would rather wait until the next day, unless it be Paramount Plus, because apparently they're gonna just put that on the back burner and they will decide when will they go on and distribute their show. So it's like, if you're ever waiting for their next season, then you might as well go on and buy like $9.99 of course for the season, or like $20 of course for like one season, and go on and watch that before Paramount Plus distributes that online. It's like no wonder why of course that streaming service is failing, even though of course it's trying to, well, not failing, but at least to the least I can say it's struggling. So that's just what I wanted to discuss too. In that case, let's just talk about an example. So if you remember last month, YouTube TV and Paramount Global had a carriage dispute that threatening to take their channels off from their platform. So in response, they take your sympathy and tell you to, tell your provider not to take off their channels, even though they're the same company. They're the same corporations that are responsible for taking off the channels before February 13th. It's like they're telling you this. It's like if you're YouTube TV, of course, and it's like they're threatening that they're gonna cut off all of your favorite channels, of course, even though most of the channels are irrelevant. So they're going to tell you this: call the number we're screening now, of course, and tell Dish or tell YouTube TV, tell any cable provider to, don't turn off Paramount, or just, you actually know what I mean, though. Just don't turn off the TV, of course, and, don't let them cut off Paramount, any of the Paramount network scores that they're currently airing, or the Paramount channels that's owned by Paramount Global. Now, for some reason, I just have an accent there, but anyways, and so that's what happened. So what you're saying right there, of course, is called a threat, because they're threatening cable networks, of course, and to subscribers, of course, to pay off more money, just so you can go ahead and watch more of the same things over and over again. Just like there's just no point for even doing this carriage dispute, because you're really not going to miss anything. In that case, you're not missing anything if all you're going to do is watch the same content over and over again like last year. So if last year you're seeing the same programming as this year, then it's like, what's even a point at all then? Like, at what cost have you made when you're watching reruns all the time? But at the end of the day, of course, they actually reached a short-term extension that temporarily resolved the dispute. But here's my conclusion: you've actually just played the victim card, and it's basically a manipulative tactic where someone exaggerates or fabricates their victimhood to get sympathy or to avoid responsibility. And it can be used in many situations, including personal relationships, businesses, and charitable giving. So if you have played a victim card, then you just know you can't profit anything, of course. It's like if a show isn't profitable, then you just know, of course, it's going to be profitable. It's like, don't really blame others, of course, because they don't really care about that channel. Even MTV, of course, is also dead as well, because it used to be music television. Now it's just reality television. In that case, of course, I can understand why public access is no longer relevant either, because most of the time you'll just see them as outdated, inferior equipment. But at the end of the day, you're learning something out of it and just seeing the same thing over and over again. Thus, that's the reason why, of course, if I ever made some research, then the episode's going to go on for so long. But at least I know what I'm talking about. But I'm not trying to say that I'm more superior than the other creators, of course, on YouTube. You can go on, of course, and listen to that for more details than what I can provide to you for the moment being. So, in conclusion to all this, of course, I can tell you this. Public access, of course, may not be as relevant as it is. Public access may not be relevant as it used to be. But if you have fun, of course, you can always promote your own show on YouTube or on social platforms. So it's like, if you ever have your own show, then maybe you might as well just, promote all that, of course, and promote all the marketing online, on social media. And, who knows? Maybe it'll be successful. Maybe it'll be a flop. It just all depends on the audiences and your demographics, because that's what I'm going to be doing soon, a pitch deck. Anyways, I think I said enough, of course, about that. So let me talk about one more thing before I go on to the next segment. And let's talk about the whole sign-off. So it's the end of the night. Broadcast, of course, has ended their programming after late night programming at best. So you have interviews, you have talk shows, you have variety shows, and now that you've ended your talk shows, you've ended your night shows, it's just time for us to say goodbye at this point. There's just no reason why, of course, they should be broadcasting 24/7, because all you're going to be seeing, like I said, is just reruns or even irrelevant content, some irrelevant programming. And if it's not irrelevant programming, then all you're going to be seeing here is infomercials. So if infomercials is all you're going to be hearing at this point, then you're boring. That's all I can just say. If they're absolutely boring if your channel is repetitive and if there's nothing else to provide. So if like for Saturday morning programming, it's like if you're ever watching a show that's like repetitive and you're seeing the same set of shows that are considered to be like outdated and not outdated, then you're not really learning anything, because you already have VSOS, of course, as something educational. You have Khan Academy as well. That's what I've always heard. That's what I always hear, of course, when it comes to education. So it's like educational programming is just no longer relevant unless if it's built like the science guy. Now, of course, you may have heard of that before. Now you're going to hear me say that again. Bill Nye the Science Guy is about science. Animal Rescue is about saving animals and how to save animals. DogTales is just a documentary about dogs. Missing is basically crime related because they're talking about the missing people. But is it really educational? Well, most of the time, to me, of course, I say it's not. Even though, of course, you can always learn the basic essentials, of course, out of television, it just seems inferior because you can learn a lot, of course, out of social media. So if there's no longer cartoons, of course, for the children to watch, then obviously cartoons on cable television isn't going to be any better. There's just no longer any needs, of course, for programming blocks if they're no longer relevant. So it's like if you're ever seeing the same shows over and over again, and even classifying as classics, airing the older episodes that's outdated, then it's obviously just a check mark. And it's not going to satisfy anybody. That's just the thing, of course, that I find it disappointing, and I just find it underwhelming that nobody really watches Saturday morning cartoons or even Saturday morning programming. MeTV, I guess you can say, is completely irrelevant to all this, but it's not your savior at all. I can tell you this right now, MeTV is not your savior, but at least you have something out of it. But again, as I said before, what I don't like is when they speed up content. And if they decide to edit or modify the original show, then they're probably ruining it. So if you ever want to watch the original versions of them, then you might as well consider like DVDs or streaming services. I mean, it's going to cost you money, but it's better if you decide you would rather watch the original version than just a censored or even syndicated version of your favorite show. So, in conclusion, all this, if you're considering to turn the TV off, you might as well just sign off and just stop broadcasting. No transmitter maintenance, just stop. There's just no need, of course, to broadcast 24/7. Now, at this time, we're already reaching the 45 minutes. So, at the end of the day, of course, as I said before, cable television is just no longer relevant. You're just better off promoting your shows out of social media, like YouTube, or even Spotify, Apple Music, if you wanted to. And even, of course, there's there are other streaming platforms, of course, that you can go on and promote your show with. And so if you ever learn marketing, then it's obvious that you're obviously, of course, just starting to become a professional. Just consider tutorial videos, of course, as I said last week, and you'll just slightly improve. It all depends on talent, and it really all just depends on how you do it, how you executed it. In television nowadays, like I said, it's just the opposite of it. It's just a check mark just to satisfy the FCC requirements. And this show, it will not be a part of the FCC requirements at all. It's a whole different show. It's a YouTube show. It's a show dedicated to Spotify, even though it has nothing to do with Spotify. But it's just another podcast, just me rambling for like an hour long. Anyways, we're already reaching to 45 minutes. We're going to go on, of course, and if I have enough time, we're going to move on, of course, to the last thing that I'll talk about before I go. So, now, of course, this is the part where I discussed my 15 minutes here, of course, of Baking Illusions. That was originally the draft, of course, behind episode 2. That was because I actually never had any research, of course, and I really had no idea what I was doing back then. Now, of course, that I actually have an outline. Now let's go on, of course, and talk about a controversial talk on the heart cake drama from TikTok to Walmart. Here's one of the quotes, of course, I actually wanted to share with you. What is actually grabbing my gears here are the people in the comments and other videos advertising the cake planning about what home bakers are charging for vintage heart cakes. I just find that highly disrespectful to everybody who put so much time and effort into their cake, especially And let me quote this right now. Quote unquote, especially having a birthday cake is a luxury. Now, do I see a birthday cake as a luxury? No. And the reason why a birthday cake is not a luxury is because anybody can afford a birthday cake. So whoever even thought of that, of course, and even though everybody knows who the TikToker is, I'm going to keep it anonymous just to protect and actually nobody needs to be protected because you already know because I already know that TikTok already has backlash. They decided to go on and they ended up private their accounts, never to be seen again. Unless if they want to do a response. Or if they don't really accept criticism at all. So, in a nutshell, of course, it's just a poorly edited Yab session that discusses on cakes for a minute and a half. And I say poorly edited because they just don't leave because literally the user haven't left any space, of course, for them to talk. And the words, of course, are just so fast, it's like you can just see a lot of epilepsy warning. It just flashes words, and the cake, of course, as you've seen, looks a bit inferior. And that's just my personal opinion. But it's like, they talk like this, they talk like this, they talk like this. It's like, if I ever talk like this, of course, and me, of course, personally, I would say, I would really sound annoying if that's the way, of course, I talked. That's why, of course, that's why I don't really intend to sound whiny. At best, I don't intend to sound whiny at all. So, let's talk about a scenario right now. Here's the thing. Imagine that you go to a grocery store, and now the choice is yours. You can buy a customer plain cake for any amount, whether they buy it for like $10, $20, like $10, $20, $30. It just doesn't matter how much you pay for a birthday cake. It's yours. It's your personal choice. It's just you. You decide, of course, how much you want to pay for your cake. But here's what I will say right now. I would personally recommend to either get a $20 or $50 cake. It's like you don't really need to spend over $50, of course, just so you can get a birthday cake, so you can eat that, of course, alone. That's what I'm trying to say here. It's like for Walmart cakes, of course, Walmart cakes and homemade bakers are unequal. Because when it comes to birthday cakes or even regular cakes, you can always use that on your birthdays, your weddings, anniversaries, graduations, and even your holidays. And whichever cake you buy, of course, from a grocery store, from a supermarket, anywhere, it personally doesn't matter, of course. And so this drama, as I said before, is just completely unnecessary. There's just no need for that drama to start, all because somebody said that birthday cakes are a luxury. Of course they're not, and nobody's going to believe you anyway. And here's the thing. The cakes from Walmart, of course, apparently is the problem because it's cheaper and it's affordable. So if you can buy an affordable cake, they're going to mock you and they're going to insult you as broke. And even though, of course, I would be wrong because somebody's going to be politically correct about this and say something about how I'm not supposed to call them broke. But then again, of course, it's my show, so I don't really care, of course, if this is politically wrong. And then there's the delusional statements where they say that their cakes are putting them out of businesses. And the thing is, this is not about you. Because Walmart, of course, and you are a whole different thing. You're the consumer, so you go on and buy their cake mix or their box mix. So that's none of your business. If Walmart decides to go on and, start making their own cakes for like $5, $10, I don't see it as a problem. So I don't see why you're the one who's complaining about that, oh, my birthday cake's better than Walmart. My birthday cake's better than Costco, than, Seattle's Foods. That's just none of your business, and I don't personally care. That's nobody's, like, at the end of the day, it's really nobody's businesses. And at the end of the day, you end up with this. You're just a complete sociopath if you believe that your birthday cakes are better, or any cake that you build are better than a grocery store, a personal baker. Like, I don't care who it is. I call you a sociopath, and it's a fact. And the reason why I called you a sociopath is because of this. One of them, of course, would say birthday cakes are luxury. I call them false. One of them would say that, these birthday cakes are, putting me out of business. Of course, they're not going to put you out of business because Walmart is obviously like a corporation. It's a business. Of course, anybody can buy it. And even then, of course, I do really have any, to be honest with you, do you really have any customers to begin with right now? Do you really have any customers at all? Because if you don't, then it's like there's just no reason for you to complain about your own cake versus a grocery store's cake or even a supermarket one. And here's the thing, it's not really a fact either. So to say that their cakes are better than supermarket cakes, it's a sign of pride. And if you ever learn the Bible, if you're ever a Christian, you'll just know why. Of course, I explain that. Because for me, of course, I really can't explain why, but you'll get the gist, of course, if I say that my cake is better than whoever's cake it is. It's like, it's not really competition. That's why I say the price doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter who you buy it. It's someone's cake. It's your cake. It's all yours. Not the same thing as the world is yours, but the item, the product, anything that you buy is yours. It's your property. Nobody can take it. That's why, of course, I would say that the cake is not, that a birthday cake even then is not essential. That's why, of course, it's important to balance your, budget and quality. Because with budgeting, you can always afford something, but you always need to prioritize whether you really need it or not. So it's like if you ever want to buy a t-shirt, a hoodie for like $30, then I see it as reasonable. If you ever buy a hoodie that's like $70 or like $100, why would you ever purchase that? Of course, like why would anybody even pay $100 for a hoodie, unless it's a custom one? So it's like with me, of course, I just don't pay like less than like $30 or $50 or like $40 for a hoodie. But even my parents, of course, are even concerning that I just pay for these stuff, and so like $10 hoodies, of course, is another good option. $20 one, I guess that could just be the limit. And there's a whole difference, of course, between quality and affordability. Quality, of course, is when you actually have items, of course, that are professional. So it's like professional means quality. They take all the time, of course, to be professional. They take all the time to have like all their talent to really produce something, of course, and manufacture them. Well, of course, with affordability, it's just a cheap replica, of course, of the item that you have. So think of Temu. I don't recommend Temu because it's all cheap stuff that I just don't really buy. If I ever want to buy like new clothes, something new, of course, then I would not recommend Temu. And not even Amazon either. Instead, of course, I would actually go on a reliable source that actually has all the things. Like, I actually used to buy on Amazon. Nowadays, I just don't, because what's really relevant about them nowadays? That's my own question, of course, aside from cheap products made from China. So, and then with budgeting, of course, and so thanks to budgeting and quality, you just need to prioritize a balance. So, if you ever buy a quality meat product that's under your budget, then you can go out and just buy it. And if you ever consider the vintage one, then you might as well just then I would say to just be careful on the quality. The quality all really depends, of course, on how it looks like, but at the end of the day, the quality is what matters the most than just the budget. You can always buy like a $50 hoodie, a $50 dress, but as I said before, just prioritize, of course, the quality, of course, of the product, and the quality, of course, behind the owner, the businesses. That's what you really need to care about. That's the most thing that you really have to care about. So really, at the end of the day, I would just say this. Don't spend $200 on a birthday cake that you'll eat alone, but it's okay, of course, if you decide to buy a $20 cake, then a private baker's $80 cake. So it's like if you're a private baker, maybe, of course, they won't hire you because your cakes are expensive. But don't feel bad, because if you ever find a customer that actually loves your works, then you can always, of course, talk to them, of course. And if you're kind enough, at least spend the time, of course, to make adjustments. Like, spend the time to be kind, spend the time to be caring to your customers. That way, of course, you'll be successful. That's the most thing that I actually want to give you. That's the most of one of the advices I actually want to give you. Now, sure, this is not a motivational show like stay in your lane, but again, this is for my personal experiences. It's another commentary show, but I just wanted to give you some suggestions, of course, as time goes on. So, whether you decide to go on a private baker, of course, to make your own custom cake made, hopefully, of course, you can see quality. So, if there's quality, then you're achieving success. And if there's not any quality, but they're like giving you like $200, but they have inferior quality, but their skills are inferior, then I would call them as con artists. And that's when, of course, they scam, and that's when they really convince that they're making their cakes professional. You don't really think, of course, they can really trust them, of course, but without trust, then it's like, why would you ever trust them when you can't really trust yourself either. So if you're a TikTok baker who buys cake mix at a supermarket, it only makes like minor adjustments, and you decide to lie to the audience that they're using real ingredients when you, as a baker, are only using a box mix or a cake mix just so you can make your own cake and decide, oh, I'm actually going to sell my cake because I'm completely authentic and I want to pay the customers $200, $300 on a birthday cake. Then I would suggest this. If you're passive aggressive on each customer and you don't really care about, don't have a passion for, and if you don't have a passion for baking, then I would not recommend you at all. Just, if you're a customer right now, just don't buy their products. Just don't buy anybody who's passive aggressive, who doesn't, and the ones who doesn't really care about you. So in that case, of course, just really you need to buy somebody who cares, somebody who's trustful. You just need loyalty as well. That's another thing I want to discuss about as well. Loyalty is the most important thing that you'll need because of trust and loyalty. Then of course you have communication, and when there's communication, you always have to learn that of course everybody's going to be different. So hopefully, of course, if you ever find a baker who's like kind and caring and sweet, like if you ever find a baker, of course, who has a passion and wants to grow in the future, then I would actually support them. So if you ever find anybody who has these traits, then support the businesses. They deserve their money, not the TikTokers at all. So if you're passive aggressive, you don't really care about it, you just want to rush quantity over quality, then you don't deserve the money that the customers pay for you. That's a fact. At least for me at least. So I think I said enough here. Of course, it's already going to be an hour long, so also, one more thing, by the way, before I go. So, they actually call it the Vintage Hard Cake course. And since Valentine's Day is already over, I just wanted to explain this right now. Like, what's vintage about it? And I was originally going to explain that more, but because I'm currently out of time, I think I've actually said enough. Hard cakes, of course, are not vintage. It's just hard cakes. It's for Valentine's Day. Just please don't exploit the word vintage, of course, because there's a massive difference between vintage and modern day society. And I'll talk more about that, of course, in a future episode about what's vintage about it, like the authenticity, of course, of vintage and what's real about vintage, and how to exploit it. So stick up for an episode for that, of course, and coming soon. But for now, I think that's all I have to say. So come back next week where I talk about AI, of course, and let's celebrate the 2-year anniversary of my love and hate relationship with artificial intelligence. In other words, the first AI that I've used, ChatGPT. Until the next time, this is me, Jon Inahuazo, of course, once again. Thank you again for listening to The Loner. I'll catch you guys next week at the same time, the same hour. Hope you guys have a great weekend, have a great day, and, take care of yourselves.
This has been a production of the Essex County College Podcast Club. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved.